recently I was having a series of debates with someone on a bunch of different topics, but DEI came up, and my general take on it was that we should be pushing towards essentially a colorblind society. And the person I was talking to said, well, that's essentially idealistic. And that's not really the way the world works. And of course, I'm going to push for something that benefits me and my group of people. And although, yes, I do concede that that is kind of an idealistic standard to push towards, is that one of meritocracy and colorblindness. The point, I think, was very salient in that conversation, and I think it's one that needs to be brought up in the instance of Charlie Kirk, and that is that if you do not push towards and set examples of the perfect, if you will, well, then there's no path for anyone to follow. And instead, in what the person was pushing for in the conversation, is that if you're trying to advantage one group, or in the instance of Charlie Kirk, if you find it justified to kill the people that you disagree with, well, then the pendulum's just going to swing back in the other direction. And then the people who looked up to the person that you're cheering on the murder of, well, guess what? Now they're going to find justification in murdering the person that you look up to. And that's kind of the take that I want to approach it from, because I think there have been a million takes on it already, but it's promoting a message of tolerance and understanding and trying to push towards the greater good and towards the perfect. Forget that obviously there will be stumbles along the way, but if you do not push towards the perfect, there's no path that will ever be laid in that way. And if I'm being realistic, I really don't know much of Charlie Kirk. The only time that I had really seen him even mentioned was I covered an interview between he and Tucker Carlson, and I think he had, and this is the reason why I covered it, but I think he had populist leanings, which I think was actually quite helpful. I think he was very Christian and very Republican. I think he covered for Trump and Epstein. I think, there are a bunch of different things that I disagreed with him on, looking further into some of his statements. But again, I view that the things he was saying, A, I think he truly believed in them, and B, I think a lot of them had the leanings of, and whether you agree with him not on his approach to where he got, the things that he believed in, he thought would be better for the whole of society and better for everyone. And again, whether you agree with his approaches or not, killing is not the way to go about disagreeing, expressing your disagreements with someone. And the thing that is most worrying, I think, about this is that, because I wanted to just take a couple days to kind of see what everyone's saying, see the rhetoric on both sides. It is very disturbing, the polarization and how anyone can be cheering for the death of someone who basically got famous from going to college campuses and speaking to people who had the opposing belief of them. And the reason that's particularly troubling to me is that that's something that I try and do, is seek out opposing positions and have just ideally constructive conversations with people. Now, do I think the way that he went about it, going in and essentially dunking on college kids, yeah, okay, that was not great, but at the core of it is going out and allowing people to speak their mind and then showing a varying viewpoint. And I think someone who's engaging in that kind of rhetoric and that kind of conversation is, actually I think was not, I don't know why he was villainized so much for that. I think that is something that should be emulated with everyone. You should be afraid to, if you believe something, you should be able to be challenged on it. That's why I like having conversations with people, is I think that I put a lot of thought into the positions that I come to, and I like to see if someone else can provide some sort of disagreement with me on that maybe might change my mind in a certain way. And again, the thing that is most concerning to me about this, I've briefly touched on the reactions that have been on the left, but also the most troubling thing about it is now the reaction that's coming from the right. And I think it is something that is not surprising to me. I don't want to say it's not justified, because at some level, and I think this was a good point that I have seen made, but when you're having someone who is just trying to have conversations and you meet that with violence, well, then the only takeaway that most people will be able to get from that is that conversation is no longer an option. And the thing you have to think about with that is that two sides of violence, that's how you end up with a civil war. And oh, by the way, if you are on the left, the people on the right are the ones with majority of the weapons, the guns. So getting these people hyped up is not in your best interest. I know you might think you're tough as an Antifa person, but on the whole, Republicans like guns. Republicans want to protect the Second Amendment. You're not going to be able to. They practice more with the guns. And again, this is as someone in the center, just my take on both sides. What are you doing? Because you can't commit violence and not expect violence back. And that's part of what's worrying to me, is I have seen people posting and sharing. I have friends on both sides. I have seen people posting and sharing, well, now guess what? Now we're going to be the party of violence. I have seen this shared. I don't agree with it because, again, I come from the standpoint of we sit down and we have a conversation. And I think the problem is the ratcheting up of the rhetoric over and over and over, because even if you're not going to act on it and you're just upset and you're airing your grievances and how aggrieved you feel at this particular assassination, well, your words, someone else who's not mentally sound might see them, and then it might inspire them to an act of violence. And that's my biggest problem with all of the media, is how long can you constantly call people Nazis and fascists, and even though there's a communists and all these things, before some mentally ill person sees it. And that's the thing, is I just made a video about mental illness. More and more and more people, especially after COVID lockdowns, and people who grew up in that and are lacking social interaction during their formative years, these types of people, again, will get charged because of this rhetoric. And again, you might think, oh, I would never actually do something. I just had an outburst of anger about the events. Well, guess what? Someone else might see that. And that's what they do. And so all the time with the media and with influencers and all of these people going out and making these extremist claims about how the other side, it's an existential crisis and we can't allow them to get elected and we can't platform them and we can't listen to them. You can't have that conversation. You need to be, and that's the point that I make when I'm having these conversations, is I want people to see the path to perfect. See that you can listen, you can sit down with someone, you can listen to an opinion that you don't like, and it's not going to hurt you. And that is exactly the point that I think needs to be brought up in instances like this. And it's been just very concerning to me because I have always, again, firmly in the center, but I've always said that I generally prefer having conversations with people on the right because they're usually more rational. And I've said that for over a decade. When I first saw extremism and the inability to listen to points of view cropping up on the left. And now I see those same tendencies cropping up on the right. And I have for a couple of years now. But that's the thing, is try to seek out people who have opposing viewpoints to you. Try to have conversations with them. Don't just shut them out. Listen to their points and then try and make your own points. And that's a huge component of it, I think, because I'll sit, again, in the same conversation that I referenced at the beginning. He goes, oh, well, I bet you believe this, this, and this then too. And I go, no, I don't believe those things. Here's why I think, let me explain to you why I think the way I do. And then we sat down and I've had multiple conversations with that person since. And we both openly agree that, well, we don't agree with each other on these certain things, but we're willing to listen to each other, we're willing to talk to each other, we're willing to have a dialogue. And at the end of the day, I hope he feels the same way, I actually gave him the compliment of, you're someone on a pretty extreme left, and I'm impressed because normally when I talk with people of those same viewpoints and stances, they just flip out and they don't want to talk to you and they walk away or they shout you down or whatever. That's how they generally handle things. So I gave him that compliment. And truly, to me, I think that at the end of the day, the only thing I care about in who I surround myself with, in my friends, in family you're kind of attached to, but in people that I associate myself with, the only thing I care about is, are they a good person? And that should be the only thing that you judge another person on. If you see them doing despicable things, if you see them doing, and not, I'll use the word evil things, but I'm talking about objective evil. There's a difference between objective evil and things that are in opposition to what you believe. That's not evil. And so, I just wanted to make this video to essentially drive home the point that there needs to be more room for conversation. There needs to be more interfacing with people who you disagree with, because that's going to humanize that person to you. And I'll say it again, I've said it before many times, but if your opinion differs from mine, I don't care, because when it comes down to it, the only way that your opinion influences me is if a bunch of other people agree with you. More people agree with you than agree with me, and then I guess I'm wrong in the first place anyway. But on the average every day, someone else's opinion does not affect me at all. They can live their life, I don't care. And that's my general viewpoint. is that maximum freedoms, everyone can live their life as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's. And I think that is the thought to leave everyone with, and that is the thing, like or dislike Charlie Kirk, that I think everyone needs to take away from this, is that A, tone down the rhetoric, and B, try to be tolerant of other people's opinions. Seek them out, because at the end of the day, most of the time, what people believe is what they think is good for the greater population. They may be misinformed and they got to their conclusions incorrectly or whatever. But again, you have to build towards perfect. You have to set the example of perfect. Otherwise, no one will be able to follow that path because it won't exist. And someone has to take the first step. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.